Hello everyone, it's Silvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to have a look at the best mass market decks for 2024 so far. So this is probably my favorite video of the year. This one and the one that I do at the end of the year, where I basically look at all of the mass market decks that have been released during the year, and I select the ones that I think are the best ones. But the one that I publish this time of the year is just a half-year check. And it's always really interesting because most of the time you will see that there's a lot of seasonal decks that you can see. And it's obviously depending on how the publishers work their schedule into the year. But it's always very interesting because we also get, by May, June, we also get new catalogs out. And so we can have a look at what to expect in the months of October, especially where obviously because of Halloween, there's a lot of publishers coming out with, let's say, Halloween or spooky decks. And so it's very exciting. But let's have a look. So I have 10 decks. I decided for this year's video that I'm going to divide them in 5 tarot decks and 5 oracle decks, simply because I think that lately we've been really spoiled when it comes to really beautiful and also very interesting oracle decks. And when it comes to tarot decks, I think that perhaps in 2024 at least, we've had a few really, really good ones, but not let's say that I'm mostly anticipating a better second half of the year, and we'll see in December. So we'll start with an oracle deck. So this is the first oracle deck that I wanted to show you. Let me just zoom in. This is the Inner Child Oracle by Amanda Ling Aisling, and this has been published by Hay House. It was released at the beginning of the year. I believe it was around February. And I have to say, so if you have been watching my channel for quite some time now, you will remember that when I got this deck, I was overseas. And I was really excited about it. But when I got it, my very first impressions were actually not that positive. And, first impressions are exactly that. They are first impressions. You haven't worked with the deck yet, and so you don't really know if it's going to be something for you, if it's going to resonate with you, if you will find a particular spot in your practice to use this deck. And I thought that I wasn't going to use it much because it does have a very cosmic, starseed, child related vibes. It doesn't mean that it's not beautiful. I always said that it's absolutely gorgeous. I love this style. It's very, as I said, cosmic. I really love the fact that you got some kind of a photographic collage, but then also there's some kind of manipulation. And I think that it's very well done. But my initial response wasn't positive, simply because I personally was at the moment in my practice in which I was really looking for a deck, oracle deck specific, that would help me in my inner child practice. So how to, let's say, revisit my inner child, invite my inner child to speak up, listen to what the message was, and then work towards healing the wound, which is, by the way, we're going to do that starting from, I think it's a couple of weeks from now, with my Starlight members. We're going to do exactly that. So we're going to look and we're going to go down together in a tarot roadmap to the inner child. So we're going to focus on a number of things related to that part of our inner child that has been perhaps going through some tough times, and it has retained the memory of those tough times. And it needs to speak up, it needs to be released. And so I was thinking about this deck, and I was thinking, it doesn't really do anything for me when it comes to that specific kind of work. But then I started actually working with this deck, and let me tell you, this is an amazing deck. And as soon as I realized that, every time I talk about this deck, I always kind of say that I was wrong my first impressions at least were wrong, because it doesn't matter that it does have this kind of cosmic vibes to the images, because it's just really, really important in it. It's a very intense kind of deck, and especially when it comes to the keywords, or rather the messages. These are very poignant. They're very powerful. They really go deep. And that is one of the things that you expect from a deck you're using in that particular way. And so I am so very happy that I got this deck and I didn't rehome it, even though my first impressions were not positive, because I've done some really fantastic work with this deck. So this is the Inner Child Oracle. Okay, so now we're gonna go to a tarot deck, and the first one that I want to show you is this one. This is a French deck. It's Le Tarot Arthurien by Claire Duval, and if you are not familiar with this deck, but you might probably recognize the artwork, because the artwork is by the one and only Anna Turian. So Anna Turian is also the illustrator of the famous Bone, Stone and Earth Flesh Tarot, which is definitely coming mass market. We don't know when, but soon, hopefully. And she's also released another tarot deck this year around February, I believe, that it was called the Tarot of Echoes. That one is also coming mass market. Again, we don't necessarily know any timeline, but hopefully soon. I absolutely love her work. Another mass market tarot deck that she's illustrated is the Tarot of the Abyss, which is absolutely fantastic. It's one of my favorite decks ever. It's one of the best readers that I've got in my entire collection. So obviously, whenever Anna Turian is illustrating another deck, and by the way, newsflash, there is an oracle deck which is called the Pathwork Oracle, illustrated by Anna, which is coming out mass market, I think by US Games in a couple of months' time. So if you like Anna's art style, keep an eye out for that one. This one is the Arthurian Tarot, but the French edition. And let me tell you, there's been a lot of rumor about this deck. So this deck was for sale in around December last year, but because it was just for sale in French-speaking countries, you kind of had to go through Amazon France to get it, which is what I did. And it did arrive in January. So even though the publication date on this deck is, I think, November or December 2023, it came into my collection this year, and so I'm not cheating. I'm not cheating. This is right to be here for the 2024. This is an amazing deck, and I have to say I absolutely love the guidebook. As I was saying earlier, there's a lot of rumors about this deck. Is it coming out in an English version or not? We don't know yet. What I do know, and I can confirm that because I then watched Anna Turian's Instagram account published a story a couple of months ago in which she was actually, no, it wasn't a story, I think it was a survey, and she was asking people if they would have appreciated, if they would have bought an English version of this deck. And obviously I think that the response was 100% yes, of course. I mean, yes, please. This is an amazing deck. As I was saying, I don't know whether they will decide to translate it in English or not. In any case, the book, I have to be honest with you, you do kind of need to know French in order to appreciate it, because it does have a lot of information. And even though, you know, these days we can actually get by with Google's Translate, but I have to admit, I speak French and I really, I didn't necessarily have to translate, but I was, let's say there were a couple of paragraphs here and there in which I probably needed a translation. And so I really do recommend that you use either Google Translate or that you speak French if you want to actually use the guidebook. But this is a tarot deck. So if you want to use it, you don't necessarily need to speak French because you use tarot all the days, maybe not every day, but you use tarot, you know how to read tarot. This is a tarot deck, the meanings are there, the images are there, the titles are in French, yes, but you will be able to quite easily understand what the cards are. I absolutely love the production value, by the way. This is one of my favorite cardstock. It's a very soft, silky to the touch, but also papery, matte cardstock that it just fans out like a charm. I'm just gonna show you. And it shuffles really, really well as well. It's got this kind of matte gold gilding, which is my favorite because it doesn't get chipped, or at least not as much as the glossy one. And it's not really sharp. Let's say it doesn't really scratch your fingers when you shuffle. It is borderless. It really ticks all the boxes, at least for me, my personal preferences. As always, if you're familiar with Anna Torian's work, you will see all of the things that make you love her tarot. The strong intensity of the emotions that transpire from the faces of the characters, but also the really lovely combination of colors. And, this is obviously a thematic deck, so it's obviously an Arthurian deck, so we're not going to see anything modern in these cards because it is staying on theme. But at the same time, it's a very interesting, very, very interesting deck. And I remember when I first shown this deck in my channel, I remember talking about the Six of Swords. And I remember Claire Duval actually reaching out to me and saying that she really appreciated that I explained the way in which the Six of Swords was referring to science. So it's a bit thoughty from that point of view. At the same time, it does have a bit of an RWS influence. But it's an amazing deck, and I really believe that when I like a deck, it needs to tick a few boxes. It cannot just be really beautiful. Of course, I do appreciate aesthetics just like anybody else does. But I also look for a deck that it's giving me something else. It's giving me an additional layer of interpretation to the cards. Because I've been reading, look at this Five of Pentacles, it's just really gorgeous. There is so much atmosphere coming out of these drawings. So I have been reading and collecting tarot for over 36 years now. So I have a big collection. But also, what I like is those decks that actually stand out. So if a deck is just beautiful, of course I will probably buy it because I am a collector as well as a reader. But I want to appreciate what the deck is giving me. And so if they make me think, if they challenge me, then it's all for the better. I love this star card as well, by the way. So this is definitely one of the best mass market tarot decks that I've seen so far in 2024, and it's Le Tarot Arthurien. The next deck that I want to show you is another Oracle deck, and it's this deck. My goodness, we were so surprised in the tarot community when US Games published this deck. It's absolutely unique. There's no other word. It's unique. It's one of those decks that every now and then you don't expect them to surprise you this much. And so it's the Wisdom of the Wild Things Oracle. It's been written by Angie Sullings, like probably 90% of the decks that have been published in the last couple of years have been written by Angie Sullings. She's extremely prolific, and we love that. And the artwork is by Eva Boniva. I have to say that this is a US Games deck, so obviously I had to wait months to get it. When I finally did, I had seen it plenty of times in other channels and on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok. And so I kind of thought that I knew what to expect. And the reason why this deck made it to the top 10 is because it still managed to surprise me, and then some. We see this with this kind of Oracle decks by US Games. You have this really nice wraparound magnetic closure kind of box. You've got some drawing and a few words on this side of the box. And then, as always, there's the guidebook. Which is in color most of the time it's in color. I can't think of any US Games Oracle deck that is not in color, but there might be. And you you start with approaching this deck, and the first impressions are, okay, this deck is a bit weird, it's a bit whimsical, it's a bit out there, it's unique. But then when you start reading with it, and when you start reading the description of the cards, let me tell you, this deck will take you by the hand and take you on an adventure, because it's almost as if you were literally stepping outside of your comfort zone, but you're not alone. Someone is actually guiding you, they're there for you, they're protecting you, they're showing you things that you wouldn't normally notice. I love this deck. I love the way in which I used it and the way in which it came through for me more than once. I think that it's absolutely fantastic because all the combinations, all the boxes, again, they're all ticked. So it's a really beautiful production, very good value. It's mass market, so it's still affordable, even though I have to say that sometimes, you can find some mass market deck that sell for about 70, 80 Australian dollars, but this one is very affordable. And it does have this kind of very glossy finish, but I'm absolutely okay with it. It comes in a really beautiful gray, I would say metallic kind of gray edging. And it's just really deep. And at first, while seeing some of these cards, I was thinking, hang on a second, is this another Brian Froud? I know that Brian Froud is not the artist behind this deck. Eva Boniva is the artist. But by looking at a couple of cards, it kind of, at the beginning at least, it was giving me Art of the Fairies kind of vibes. And while there's absolutely nothing wrong in Brian Froud's deck, as a matter of fact, I have two of them, at the same time, I was thinking, I have two of them, so do I need another deck that gives me more or less the same kind of vibes? But then again, I should really stop relying or trusting my first impressions, because again, they were proven wrong. Yes, it might remind us of that kind of art style, and in some cards it also reminds me of the John Bauer tarot, which is published by Los Carabeo. And as a matter of fact, these two together are really a match made in heaven. But I use it a lot with the Nicoletta Ceccoli tarot, and I use it a lot for a very specific kind of introspective work, and is fantastic. I have to say, especially not just because of the drawings, of course they're amazing, they're really beautiful, they are cathartic in a way, but they're also, let's say, they really call you to just think deeply about something, about a concept. You really feel like you're working a lot when using this deck. I just really, really love the guidebook. It's one of the best written guidebooks that I've ever seen when it comes to, let's say, an oracle deck that has got this kind of reach, because it's a mass market deck, so obviously it has a really wide popular reach. And so sometimes, when it comes to these products, they don't want to invest too much money on the entire production, so perhaps the guidebooks are a bit basic, but in this case there's absolutely nothing basic in this deck. So this is definitely in my top 10, and it's the Wisdom of the Wild Things. And the next deck, just to be on par, let's say, it's a tarot deck, and it's this one here. This is the Witch Sister Tarot by Julia Jeffrey. I think that this deck is just amazing. Julia Jeffrey is also the creator of the Tarot of the Hidden Realm. If you're not familiar with that one, it's also been published by Leoan. What happens with this deck is that, again, you feel like you're called to enter a new world, a world which is really engaging for you, and if you feel like you're really working when you're using this deck. It is a different world than, for example, the fairy world of the Tarot of the Hidden Realm. This deck has got a lot of references to Celtic mythology, and it's just absolutely amazing. There's so many things that I love about this deck. I mean, we always like Llewellyn Productions because they always come with this really beautiful, very elegant wraparound magnetic closure kind of box. Again, with all of these colors and writings on the flap. And as always, the books that come with the decks by Llewellyn, oh my goodness. I mean, these books are just fantastic. If they had like a hardcover, there will be a coffee table book because they're just absolutely amazing. The artwork is, as you can see, full page, it's full color. Sometimes, though, I have to say that it depends on the tarot and the deck in specific when it comes to the description of the cards. So it's still a really beautiful production, very artistic, I have to say. But in some cases, it's not always the best when it comes to the description. In this case, I have to say it is. It is incredibly beautiful. It is incredibly well done. There's also a lot to talk about because of the, let's say, the origins of this deck in specific and all of the references in, as I said, the Celtic folklore. But when it comes to the best part about this deck for me is the cards themselves and the artwork. So beginning with the backs, I mean, they are absolutely amazing. Let me just zoom in because I really wanted to see them. Look how beautiful these cards backs are. I mean, yes, they're not reversible, but to be honest with you, I actually appreciate that. I don't shuffle reversals. I read reversals, but I don't shuffle them. So I'm actually okay to have these cards like that. It's the usual Llewellyn cardstock, so I'm absolutely okay with that. It's one of those cardstocks that tells a story about, yes, you can use me, you can take me with you anywhere when you travel, perhaps in a bag, not in the box. But this deck is one of the decks that is really well made in the sense that you can use it, you can shuffle it, you can bridge and riffle, shuffle, you can overhand, you can it fans out like a charm, you can use it a lot. The artwork is so intense, and that's probably the reason why I like this deck so much. But of course, everything else about it is absolutely fantastic. It's just that when you look at the combination of color palette, which is kind of muted, almost as if there was a filter, like a do you remember like 20 years ago, 30 years ago in photography, if you wanted a really nice sunset, you put like a brown or an orange filter on your lens, on top of your lens. And obviously there were gradual filters, but when you were using a full filter, the colors were rendered in a different way. And these images remind me a lot of those filters, or the images, the photos that you could get thanks to those filters. So it's a really interesting deck when it comes to, as I said, the color palette, but also I believe that the intensity in the expressions on the characters here is probably equal, if not even more intense than Anna Turian's work. There's a lot of these characters that tell a story, and it's an amazing story. It's a very engaging one. And when we have these kind of cards that break the fourth wall, so they look directly at you and they invite you in the scene with them, they invite you to make considerations about the card, they really force you to reckon with the force that is in this card. There is that kind of engagement that you cannot always get out of other decks. And it doesn't mean that I don't like other decks that don't do that, absolutely. There might be other reasons why I like those other decks, but this is one of the decks that, because again, it ticks all the boxes, among which also the engaging level, then it's definitely one of my favorite ones for this year. And I cannot know, then at the end of the year, there might be more decks, of course, and I don't know whether this one will be making the final cut for 2024, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did, because it's really amazing, and it's the Witch Sister Tarot. So the next deck is obviously an Oracle deck, and it's this one here. Oh my goodness! I thought that when it comes to Alice in Wonderland, I thought that we've seen it all. I thought that we had so many tarot decks based on Alice, on Lewis Carroll's book. I thought that we had also a lot of oracle decks. We had mass market decks. We had indie decks. There's also a really beautiful tarot deck by Baba Studio that is centered and focused on Alice's story. But what happened was that this is a Los Carabel deck, so it's an oracle deck by Los Carabel, and this should already tell you that I always have a bit of a, not a beef per se, but I'm not entirely happy because Los Carabel, I don't know for what reason, they seem to believe that 32 cards are enough for an oracle deck, even though the tarot community keeps on saying, has kept on saying for many years, that we want at least 44 cards. It's okay, this is not 32. I think it's getting there slowly. You know, they couldn't directly go from 32 to 44, just give them some time. So obviously we're looking at 36, I believe. I could be wrong, but I think it's 36 because I've talked about this deck already. Let me just double check. So it should be, as always, we also have the various different languages, which is fine. 36, yes, we've got 36 cards. And as I said, it's not as good as 44, but we need to praise Los Carabel because it's moving towards the right direction. So it's fine. So this deck, when I saw it the first time, I think it was on Simon at the Hermit's Cave channel. And he was also really surprised by how beautiful this deck is. So I wasn't, I didn't know at first if I was on board with the fact that we are presented with a very modern kind of Alice. She's a modern teenager Alice that enters into this fantastic world and has all of these adventures. And I love the fact that her nail, you know, she has purple nails. I mean, how cool is that? I love that. When I saw it the first time, I knew that it was a very strong kind of deck because of, well, let's say the messages at the bottom. So if you're not familiar with Los Carabel Oracle decks, some decks don't even have keywords. Some decks have keywords. Some decks have messages or sentences. And this is one of those ones. So in some cases, it will make sense. It will make total sense. Unexpected invitation. Of course, you could work your way around that. In other cases, you have a title, the Duchess or the Cheshire Puss or a Mad Tea Party. So there will be a few cards that will speak to you immediately, but there will be other cards that you will probably need to go back to the guidebook in order to understand how to read them. And I have to say, when I started doing that, because I, for one, am a strong advocate in always referring back to the guidebook, even for a tarot deck, even if you know how to read it. And the reason behind that is that I actually want to know what the intent was behind the creation of this deck. What did the creator think about? What was the inspiration that led them to create something or to choose a specific image to symbolize a certain card in the deck? And so I was doing my thing, I was going through the cards and I was going through the guidebook. And I have to say that when I saw this card, I don't know, my heart kind of skipped a bit. So this is a card that says here, I don't know if you can see, making use of the ink. Now, if you watch my channel, you will know that I absolutely love fountain pen. And the reason why I love fountain pens is because I can use fountain pen inks with them. I have a really vast collection of fountain pen inks, and that is not as expensive as it sounds because I only buy or mostly buy samples, so like 2mm samples, and they're very affordable. You can buy them for like $2-3 here in Australia from distributors. And so, you know, it's not like buying a $30 deck. It's like a vial with 2mm of a color. And I absolutely love colors. But I also love the sheening and the chromo shading and the shimmering. So colors for fountain pens are absolutely, it's like a world of different shades, and I really love it. But as a fountain pen user, I also know 100% that I could never use all of the ink. It's impossible. Not even if I live to be 1,000 years old, would I have enough time to use all the ink? And if you love fountain pens, you will know that that's something very true. And so when I looked at this card, I was taken by this card. I found that it's very whimsical at the same time, because of course this ink bottle has been thrown into the face of the salamander. But at the same time, it felt like it was a very tender kind of approach to this card. And I kind of understood what the general approach to the other cards should have been, at least for me. So there is this sense of tenderness that really exudes out of the cards. And that works for me. It really resonates. I love these kind of vibes. I love that we're looking at a adolescent Alice, but she still has the bunny, the stuffed bunny with her. And there is this sense of tenderness that comes out of these cards. And so I absolutely love it. I love looking at the cards. I think I have tried pairing it up with another Alice tarot deck, but I wasn't entirely happy about the pairings, and so I really need to find a tarot deck that pairs up well with this. But for the time being, even when used by pulling one card and one card only, it actually works really well. So this definitely made the cut because I am so happy that I got this deck, and it's the Alice in Wonderland. So the next deck has to be a tarot deck, and it's this one here. It's the Mystic Palette Tarot. So this one, let's put it this way. The mass market edition has come out this year for both the colored edition and the muted tone edition, which is like a sepia kind of edition. I have both of them, however, and I have a slight preference for the muted tone edition. However, the edition that I have for the muted tone is still the indie deck, not the mass market deck. And since this video is about the top 10 mass market decks, I had to stick with the color edition. But let me say, I just really absolutely adore both of them. It's just a slight preference for the palette of the muted edition. And I also have to say that somehow, because of the difference in colors, those two decks actually cover two different areas in my practice. But I heard from other people that they find them very similar. I personally don't, but to each their own, of course. And so I just wanted to show you this one. This one, I got it when I was back in Italy in February, and it's the German edition by Königsfurt Urania. And I know that there's also the English edition. I don't necessarily remember what the publisher was of the indie edition. It could have been Leoan, but I could be wrong. I really love this deck. I also my German is not good. It's one of the languages that I speak the worst, I would say. I could still read it, so it shows that it's not overly complicated. But I do recommend, of course, the English version. The reason why I didn't get the English versions was simply because I was in Italy back then, and the English version wasn't available in Italy at the time, and I really wanted the deck, and so I just decided to buy the German edition instead. I don't necessarily know because, as I said, I don't have the English edition, but I believe that the cardstock from a German edition is slightly different. Again, I could be wrong. So this one is, I heard people saying that the English edition is very thin. This one is not. It's very sturdy. It's a great cardstock. I love it. I've been using it. It's really, really good. And this is one of my favorite cards in the deck. It's the Death card. Really love it. The Santa Muerte kind of theme, one of my favorite. Ironically, at the time we were in Italy, we went to Venice during the carnival, and there were a lot of people dressed for Santa Muerte, so it was absolutely fantastic. If you're not familiar with Ciro Marchetti, this is his typical style. So if you don't know, he's a very prolific Italian tarot and oracle also deck creator. He also made a Lenormand deck, if I'm not wrong. This is his typical style, very, very beautiful, gorgeous colors, gorgeous line work, almost photographic in the minutiae of details. really strong. Some cards are really strong, I have to say. So some of my favorites are the Encore Tarot, which is a French tarot deck, but also the Legacy of the Divine, I think is very beautiful. I love this Six of Swords because it's the gondola with, you know, the background looks like it's taken in Venice. So obviously, Venice being my favorite place in the entire planet, I really loved it. It's a bit sad that they always refer back to the Six of Swords. Every time that you see a gondola in a tarot deck, it has to be the Six of Swords because of that transaction, that journey you have to take. You don't necessarily want to take it, but you have to go to a better place. But I'm okay with it because I actually made peace with the Six of Swords. It was my stalker card a couple of years ago. Actually, towards the end of the pandemic, it was my stalker card. And yeah, I made peace with that. It's fine. I accept it. So this is really beautiful. As I said, one of the decks that when it comes to reading, it's absolutely spot on. The vibes in this deck are very engaging as well. I personally believe that the muted tone gives me completely different vibes. So that's why I'm kind of happy of having both of them in my collection. I wouldn't want to choose between the two, let's put it this way. But this is definitely one of my top 10 favorite mass market decks for this year so far, and it's the Mystic Palette Tarot. The next deck has to be an Oracle deck, and so here it is. Now, this deck is the Golden Keys of Gaia, Oracle of Elemental Wisdom by Vanessa Tate, and the artwork is by Hannah Adamashek. So sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name. I haven't seen it anywhere, and I believe it's because this is a Blue Angel deck, and so maybe they published it first in Australia and it's not available yet in other countries. I'm not entirely sure. For all of these decks, by the way, I will make sure to put the link in the description box below, just in case you want to check them out for yourself or you want to eventually buy them. But this is an amazing deck. Oh my goodness. So it's a Blue Angel deck, and if you don't know, Blue Angel lately has slightly changed the cardstock. So it's a very nice cardstock. The tactile experience is fantastic. It's very smooth to the touch, very, very smooth. It does give you a rose petal feel adjacent, not 100% rose petal, because it doesn't have, like, the cards don't stick one to the other, as you can see. But I don't know how else to explain it. These are the backs, by the way, which is the same image as the front of the guidebook. But it's very nice. It feels very nice to the touch. It's a very pleasant experience. I really love this deck. I didn't know if I would have. Now, I have to say that I used it for at least a month, and it's become one of my favorite. As you can see, it's kind of minimalist, the art style. Also, when it comes to the color palette, it's kind of minimalist. But the strength of this deck is in the combination between the images and the title, or rather the keyword, because the titles are also keywords, but also the sentences at the bottom. So you can see here, for example, this card says magic, there is magic in the air, follow the signs. Or surrender, dance with what is rather than what isn't. Make the most of the situation. The messages are so eloquent. It's unbelievable. I try pairing it up, and it pairs up really well with the Line Strider tarot and the Other King tarot, is it the Winter Seer? I think it's the Winter Seer Tarot. They're both by Charlotte Thompson. It pairs up really well with those decks. It also pairs well with the Vindur deck by Leah Pantea. But I have to say, when I was using it in combination with a tarot deck, I was enjoying it. It was working, but I was only focusing on, let's say, the keywords / titles. when I actually wanted to go deeper into the meanings of the cards and reading what the sentences were at the bottom, I found that it's actually best to be used alone. And so I actually do a lot of one cards pull from this deck in the morning. And I kind of take that message as the message for the day, and I do my journaling. So this one, for example, says reflection time, be honest with yourself. Or Rainbow Bridge, embrace your uniqueness to bridge gaps in your life, foster connections, and bring unity and harmony to those around you. It is very deep, very kind. There's a lot of very compassionate kind of cards that come, in this deck. And I really appreciate that. As you know, compassion is my drive, and I always appreciate when I find it expressed in a deck. So really, really so impressed with everything that they've done. Blue Angel lately is just doing something amazing. I'm really happy that it's an Australian company, so we don't have to wait 6 months to get the decks. It does have a really nice book as well. It is divided in color. I don't know if you noticed, but there's 5, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 different colors in the cards. And so obviously that gives you not just a number, but you can also recognize what kind of category these cards belong to. For example, the yellow ones is the golden key of fire. So it's elemental, because we talked about this, oracle of elemental wisdom. So obviously there's a reference to elements. And it's just really, really interesting. I really like it. I like using it with the guidebook. So just to give an idea, there's the thumbprint of the card, and then it repeats more or less what is written on the card, and it tells you what the card wisdom or card meaning is. There's an invitation. So this is actually very useful when it comes to prompts for journaling or meditation or any kind of introspective kind of work. Really, really interesting. And then that's it. But it's very unique, and I have to say, it's unique because even though there are decks that I use in the same way, the combination between the very beautiful, gorgeous artwork, the colors that really work for me, the titles and the messages, and the guidebook and the cardstock, I have to say, fantastic. It just makes it a unique deck. So really, really amazing. The Golden Keys of Gaia. And the next deck is the Tarot deck, and it's also, ironically, a tarot deck by Blue Angel. So Blue Angel is very famous because they produce a lot of oracle decks and books, but I know that there's perhaps another tarot deck, I think the Tarot of Light, because it is by Tony Carmine Salerno. That's also a tarot deck, but that might be the only tarot deck. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not that many. So what happened was that when I was at the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival, I went to the Blue Angel deck. I know some of the people there, and we had a really nice conversation, and I got this deck, and I was asking them about it, and they said that it's one of their favorites. Well, it was kind of obvious because obviously they made it, but it was kind of a really nice conversation around it. And so I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I had no idea what this deck was. I had never seen it before. No walkthroughs, no posts on Instagram, nothing on TikTok. And so I was very curious. Again, it might be because Blue Angel, they do ship overseas. Of course, they distribute in the US and in Europe, but sometimes they start the release of these decks in Australia. So this is obviously based, the way they explained it to me is that this is a combination of some of the oldest systems in tarot. So it's not just Marseille, even though I would say that, as you can see from the minors, it is very Marseille-like. But it's also referring back to, other traditions. I have to say, at the beginning, I think the first time that I presented this deck, I was thrown off by a couple of cards. But then I actually started reading the book and using the deck, and I immediately fell in love with it. I don't have that many decks with this kind of style, and it looks almost as if it were made or printed on a really ancient kind of paper, and you know, it looks like lithographs somehow, even though it's not, but it looks almost like one of those antique anatomy kind of paintings or books that we used to see, that I like so much. And it's really gorgeous. And I also like it because it's the medieval feathers. By the way, I don't remember whether I said the title or not. Apologies for that. So it's called the medieval feathers. And you will see that because as you can see, there's feathers, as you can imagine. And it's really, really gorgeous. Absolutely amazing. One thing though that I have to say about this deck is that I am not entirely sure if I want to keep these. So, okay, let me just show you. You see that this looks like it's the card. And then we got a white border around it. And then we have, let's say, the title of the card. So the 6 coins, for example, with a keyword, expansion. And then we also have a keyword just in case you pull the card in reverse or you want to read it in reverse, which is tentative. I know how to read it, even though I'm always fascinated by the choice of keywords for a deck, but I'm not entirely sure that I want to keep the white borders. Although I was looking into trimming them off, and then I realized that in many cases, and it's clear here, for example, in many cases, I cannot really go to these borders. You see these ones in black because let's say the artwork actually goes out of those borders. So I'm not entirely sure that I can actually find a common way for all of these cards to be trimmed, let's say perfectly trimmed or trimmed in such a way that it looks well done. And so I actually desisted. I didn't trim it. And now that I look at it, I'm thinking I want to, again, I think I want to trim it. So I'm not entirely sure. If you have this deck, or if you've seen it, have you seen it trimmed and how does it look? Let me know in the comments below because it is a really gorgeous deck. I look at the pips. I mean, yes, these are pips, of course, because it's based on Marseille. But we also know that you can get very lazy when making pips. And this one is not lazy. It's just absolutely gorgeous. The images are fantastic. Look at this one. And so, I don't know, on the one hand, I'm thinking I would probably prefer it without the white borders, but at the same time, I'm not entirely sure that I can do a good job about it. So that's why I'm asking. If you know of anyone who has trimmed the borders off, then let me know if it looked like a good job or not. This is an amazing deck. Again, really fantastic cardstock, by the way. I didn't say it, but it is one of the latest production by Blue Angel, and so it is the very similar cardstock. Really gorgeous deck, the Medieval Feathers Tarot. And the next deck has to be another Oracle deck, and so we've got this deck here, which is absolutely fantastic. It's the Dirt Gems Oracle by Anne-Louise Burdett, and it's been illustrated by Chelsea Granger. This is a mass market deck that actually was initially released a couple of years ago, I believe, as an indie deck. I am so stoked that I was able to get a mass market because let me tell you, the mass market production, the value is absolutely fantastic. Everything about it I love. It's a wraparound magnetic closure kind of box. It's got this really beautiful soft cover guidebook. It is in color, even though I was showing you the pages where the cards are actually in black and white, but it is in color, in full color, as you can see. It is very, very useful, very deep. And I have to say something about this deck, and I talked about it, I think, in a couple of weeks ago, the first time that I actually presented this deck, because it was during an unboxing video. So this deck doesn't have keywords. It does tell you the name of the plants. It is a botanical deck, so it tells you the name of the plants, of course, as you can see. But it doesn't have keywords. However, the symbology is so eloquent. It just really talks to you. You can use this deck even without the keywords. But then something happened. So I was actually setting myself up to use this deck without using the guidebook, just looking at the images on the cards and deciphering the symbols. And then, out of curiosity, because I always do that, I checked out the guidebook and I was really surprised. Because, on the one hand, there was still a kind of a reference to the images on the cards, to the symbols in the cards, but the guidebook was taking you down a slightly different path. So it's actually really helpful to work in some kind of a tandem between working with your interpretation and your intuition of what the meanings of the cards are and the description of the cards in the guidebook. And let me tell you, once I started doing that, it really blew my mind. It's absolutely fantastic. I love everything about this deck. The cardstock, again, really beautiful, very soft to the touch, quite sturdy and thick, I have to say, probably a bit too much, but then again, it's just my preference. I love also the gilding. It's the kind of matte gold gilding that is really beautiful and really high quality. So I don't have the India edition, but I honestly don't think I ever reach out with all, will want it in my collection, because this mass market deck, it comes at a very reasonable price. It's very easy to get it. I found it in a bookstore, so it's readily available. And let me tell you, it's just really fantastic. I absolutely love this deck, and it's the Dirt Gems Oracle. And last but not least, we have another tarot deck. This is the 10th deck for today. So I had to go with this one. This is the Black Violet Tarot. Oh my goodness, this deck is amazing. Again, this is a tarot deck that was originally released as an indie deck by Heidi Phelps. This one is the mass market edition by Rockpool. Everything about this deck is fantastic. I also have the indie edition of Heidi's tarot, and I love it. So I had the very special edition that had a mistake in the printing in the backs, which to me was actually a happy mistake because I like the backs better that way. But that one didn't come with a book. I think there was a guidebook that you could download in a website. But this one actually comes with a guidebook. It's a very affordable mass market deck. Like, Rockpool is never really priced really high. So I always appreciate that they try and keep it very affordable. I absolutely love also the guidebook. It's very interesting. It gives you at least a couple of keywords for the upright and the reversed meaning, and it's really well done. Now, as always, Rockpool, when it comes to quality, it's probably, it feels a bit papery. That's what I wanted to say. It feels a bit papery, and it's not super thick, but this is one of the cards that it feels like you can actually handle it really well. You can use it a lot and it won't necessarily get damaged. So I'm kind of happy that it is done this way. It's a really gorgeous, may I say, absolutely fantastic kind of purple edging. I really love this color. I wish I had other decks with this kind of colored edging. And obviously, if you're familiar with this deck, you've seen it before. It's the Black Violet Tarot. There are a few versions of this deck. There's a deluxe edition. There's a Cherry Blossom edition. This is the normal edition that has been, produced to mass market. I really like it. It's minimalist, of course, when it comes to the light work, as you can see, but it's also minimalist when it comes to the color palette because it's literally just black and white. However, there is something about black and white decks, and I actually really like them. And it depends on the fact that they really give you the opportunity to focus on the card, on the message. They're not very distracting. I think that when the artwork is so conducive of a message, it's almost better if there is less distraction when it comes to color palette. I love colors. You know that I love colors. I mean, a couple of decks ago, I was talking about the fountain pen inks that I have a collection of. So of course I love colors, but I do appreciate these kind of decks in black and white as well. And I am so very happy that Rockpool is actually picking up a lot of indie decks. Just for you to know, this year we will have the Mythologia Fennica. Also will be released mass market by Rockpool. Then there will be the Lumina. I'm not entirely sure that the Lumina Tarot will be released by Rockpool, but it will be released finally mass market after years of rumors about it. And there will be, I think, another couple of decks that it was really exciting to see in their catalog. So I can't wait to get my hands on those decks in the second part of the year. But when it comes to the first part of the year, these were my top 10 mass market tarot and oracle decks. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.